Joining me now from Washington, D.C., Director of Investigations and Research at Judicial Watch, Chris Farrell. Chris, thanks for joining us. So, Chris, I want to start off with this information that we're learning was from a report from the Washington Post. And, of course, this came from anonymous sources, and we know how that works. So I just wanted to put that out there before we start this conversation.
It's a very wise advisory to put out there. Hey, look, one way or another, that report's going to be made public. I can assure you Judicial Watch will ask for it, and we will litigate to get it. If, in fact, the Washington Post reporting is accurate and true, we don't know that it is. I have a hard time buying the idea that somehow this guy looked into unmasking and then just kind of shrugged and threw up his hands and walked away. No report, no indictments. When Samantha Power is unmasking 240 some odd people from her perch at the U.S. mission to the UN, talk about the abuse of rights, the abuse of individual citizens and their First Amendment, their communications privacy, how no one gets indicted, how there's no public report. It's tough to swallow.
Yeah, and you also have to question the timing of this and the leaks from the anonymous sources. We've seen stories planted like this in the past, and it's to negatively affect President Trump. And we've seen some of the liberal journos that is going online and gloating about this, saying, oh, you know, this was a whole hoax pushed by the president, a totally fake conspiracy theory, when we know that's not true. That being said, Chuck Ross, who's been doing a lot of great reporting on the whole Russia hoax since the very beginning. He's with the Daily Caller News Foundation. He took to Twitter and said lots of liberal journals gloating that the unmasking investigation is ending with no results, but the Durham probe, which is far more consequential, is still chugging along. So again, there was there was question of whether that will be released before the election. Some were saying that, oh, well, it shouldn't be released before the election because that would influence the election. I would argue that if it's not released before the election, that would influence the election.
That argument is valid, as you point out, both ways. And I can tell you that there's a very curious schizophrenia when it comes to our journalistic friends on the left. You know, when President Obama wiretapped, or literally ran a surveillance against the Associated Press newsroom, gathering up, vacuuming up all the telephone calls going in and out of the Associated Press, they were remarkably silent. You know, somehow they had no qualms, no problems with President Obama ordering electronic surveillance signals intelligence collection against the Associated Press, and yet they see another sort of abuse like this, and when there's no finding at all, they sort of snicker to themselves. It's a pretty obnoxious sort of attitude or result, and as you pointed out, with no sourcing to the report at the Washington Post, who really knows if it's true to begin with?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of curious that President Trump hasn't tweeted anything about this yet. I checked his Twitter just right before the show to see what he had to say about it. So far, nothing. But we know that he's been very vocal about the declassification of documents. He had a conversation about it with Maria Bartiromo on Sunday on Fox, and we have the video interview. Roll tape.
Can you demand that they release this? People are still sitting on documents.
Yeah, I hope they're going to. And I will say this, documents are being released at a level now that nobody's ever seen before. Things that nobody thought were going to get released have been released. And you're seeing it. You're seeing it all the time. You're seeing what's going on. We caught them cold.
So, Chris, as President Trump said, he caught them cold, if you will, or they've been caught cold. What does that mean? I mean, obviously the president has more intel and insight as to what's going on behind the scenes and probably is being told to the American public.
The criminal conspiracy run out of the Obama White House is being peeled back like an onion, you know, layer by layer. I'm sure the president has either been privy to or been briefed on the details of some really damning stuff. The only frustration point that I have is that I can recall at least 3 or 4 occasions where the president has ordered the release, the declassification of a variety of records and documents, and somehow or other that message never quite makes it to the Department of Justice, where career, government operatives, the folks like, look, you remember Sally Yates as the acting attorney general? The Department of Justice is manned by an army of Sally Yateses over there. And so they loathe the president. And so when he orders a release of information, they're hardly likely to cooperate. And that's even with Attorney General Barr sitting on top of the heap over there, ordering them to react. They simply do not follow the president's orders. And so whether it's classified material or whether it's information that's being withheld under deliberative process, which is another sort of category of information the government can hold back. All that stuff has got to be put out there. And I encourage and I suggest that the White House actually send teams of lawyers into these agencies and departments and force them to release these records and documents, because we've litigated against these same government lawyers for the last 25 years, and I assure you they have no interest in cooperating with the president's order.
Yeah, and Chris, unfortunately, we're just about 3 weeks away from the election, so all of this would have been
Correct.
great to know. It seems like there's been a lot of heel dragging, if you will. A lot of people say that
Yes.
the Durham probe that they've been working diligently, but really, like, we're 3 weeks before the election, and still nothing. And then it brings back to that point that it feels like we have a two-tier justice system in this country, where if you are in
Indeed.
the Trump orbit, Trump supporter, you get in trouble. If you are a Team Democrat, a D.C. bureaucrat, if you will, as well, for some reason you're above the law.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter Biden should be indicted by now, and he's not. And you'll recall that the phony whistleblower, which was no whistleblower, complaint against President Trump had him impeached in about 2 months. Zero exaggeration.
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible. And so do you think there will be any sort of justice for Flynn, based on these reports that we're reading about how, this is pretty much case closed? So what can Flynn do?
Well, General Flynn and his very able counsel have done everything in the world to try to establish or reestablish his innocence and his freedom. And that case, it's a travesty. The judge involved in it has abused his discretion and authority. The General Powell's counsel has moved for the judge to be disqualified. The appellate court can step in and resolve this, because they've ordered the case essentially to be dropped from the docket, since the DOJ no longer wishes to prosecute it. But it appears that Judge Sullivan just keeps really just kind of jerking General Flynn around. It's an outrageous abuse of his judicial authority.
Yeah. And how frustrating is this for you? I know that Judicial Watch has been heavily involved in these investigations. And I believe, according to Tom Fitton, 70 lawsuits just to try to get, public information?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we do for the last 25 years. Tom and I have been colleagues for 21 of those years, trying to dig this information out of the government. And look, the government does not want to tell on itself. And these professional political operatives, these career bureaucrats who are working 20, 30 years at the various government agencies, whether it's Justice Department, FBI, State Department, and others, President Trump terrifies them, because he's willing to kind of rip the lid off and expose all the dirty, nasty little secrets that have been going on for years and years. And they don't want that stuff exposed. So that's why you see this foot dragging and the double talk and the finger pointing and the incredible disparity of treatment between folks on Team Trump and folks on Team Washington, let's call it. This isn't the deep state. A friend of mine says it's actually the counter state. It's people that are actively working against the elected leader of the country.
Yeah, people, of course, that we didn't elect. And the news cycle moves so fast and no one's held accountable. I'm just thinking, a couple weeks ago, we found out, the FBI and their cell phones, like 20 cell phones, mysteriously didn't have any of the text messages and data anymore. A couple of them were smashed up.
Right.
And then, no one really asked any questions. No one's held accountable. I'd get it if it was like one phone. But like 20 phones, it's totally insane, and I'm glad that you guys are doing
it's the whole Mueller team, the entire Mueller team, the special counsel's office. They're the ones who magically their phones were erased from all their data.
Mm-hmm. Funny how that works, and that's never happened to my phones, but it happens to their phones and all of their phones, right? It's just crazy. Anyways, Chris, good work over there at Judicial Watch. We really appreciate what you do.